Welcome to Bond Park. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Marshall.
And welcome to Season 4 of Bond Park Podcast.
Yeah, this is a 3-part series we're going to kick off with called Where It All Began. Get it?
We really wrestled with a name for this, but we settled on Where It All Began, and we thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, Sarah came up with it, and it's the perfect name.
Thanks. Thanks, buddy. So we never really do this on our show, but let's take a minute to reflect back on the last 3 years. In July 2019, Marshall's walking past my house out on a morning walk, and I'm looking out my window, and I fling the window open to be like, Marshall, do you have time to talk to me? We hadn't seen each other in ages, and the ensuing conversation lasted for hours on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I'm so glad it did, because maybe the next day even, he asked me, do you want to make a podcast?
I did. We talked for so long that like the sun had moved over the house. We had to keep walking down the sidewalk to stay in the shade from the side of my house. The world was coming and going, waking up and doing their things. And that's how long we talked. And I emailed you from my fancy work email at the time. So I looked legit and I was like, Marshall Ward, would you like to create a podcast with me? I think it'll be easy. And here we are.
Yeah. And we really didn't have any real idea of what it would look like. It might have even been a little ways into the conversation before we knew, okay, we're going to interview a different person every show.
Totally. We had all these, I would love to go back to that notebook. I don't even know if I have it anymore, but we had all these like sort of, creative sessions trying to figure out what it would be. And I remember one of the working titles was Regretting Sara and Marshall. Was that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Stupid things my mother-in-law says. That was
Yep.
There was a bunch of ideas, and I'm glad we landed where we did because it has allowed us to meet hundreds of people in our community, and these are people that we would not have known otherwise.
Yeah, and lots of new friends as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some of the accomplishments that we've made, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is important. We got to reflect back and look at what we've done. So we have turned Bond Park Podcast into Bond Park Media, Inc.
Yep, we sure have. It's also expanded into filmmaking,
which is a new passion of mine and an old passion of yours.
Yep.
And we both have some interesting and different perspectives on how things are done. And I think we end up making some cool stuff.
Yeah, well, we're both storytellers. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking one day, Sarah can do photography and podcasting. Why wouldn't that transition pretty smoothly into filmmaking? And it has. And the
result was our little film called Playtime, which screened at the Princess Cinema in Waterloo in November of last year. And it was a great success.
Yeah, it sure was. Again, we met so many awesome people through that film.
Mm-hmm. So over the last 3 years, we've received a Regional Waterloo Arts Grant. We've received continued support from the Waterloo Region Community Foundation in partnership with the Kitchener Public Library. And we're so grateful for all of that.
We've also received a couple community affairs grants from Google right here in Waterloo. Thank you.
We're also incredibly humbled and honored that we have received a Dorothy Shoemaker Award for Excellence in Podcasting through the Kitchener Public Library. We've also received an Enabling Accessibility Ontario grant for Bond Park's website and app so that they can be accessible for more people. And we were honored with an Arts Award Waterloo Region this past year. And man, that one floored us a little bit. We were not expecting it.
Yeah, it was an amazing evening and we were so proud to be in the company we were in.
Yeah, we were. And as usual, our show would not be possible without the support of every small business owner who has reached out with their sponsorships and all of the people who are continually listening to Bond Park Podcast. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, if we named you all, we would be, the show would be 2 hours long.
Or longer.
Yeah.
If you don't know already, a fun fact about Bond Park Media is a lot of our business meetings take place walking around our neighborhood together. That's where Marshall and I seem to have our best chats.
Yeah, for sure. Out in, open spaces, preferably when it's warmer than when it's colder. Growing up here in Waterloo Region, we have a lot of shared experiences and, our kids are relatively very similar in age and we've kicked around this town our whole lives. So there's a lot that we have in common, like our love of music and local art, right? Sesame Street, hot sauce.
Oh yeah, love the hot sauce.
And many, many other things. But something that just comes up in our just kind of conversations, whether we're driving around or walking, is our food choices. Because I have been calling myself a vegetarian for the past 23 years. By strict definition, I'm an ovo-lacto-pescatarian, but I've found it more simple and straightforward to just say vegetarian. And that's a discussion in itself too. And
I'm sometimes a chipitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of chips.
A popcornitarian.
Yeah.
And for myself, I've been vegetarian since I was 12 years old.
And lately, kind of bordering right on,
On veganism, yeah, which we talk about on this 3-part series about food choices. At the time when we recorded this, I had gone not strictly, but at the time when we recorded this, I had made that leap over into veganism. And what I found is it's actually kind of a commitment. It's not that it's hard. It's just that sometimes I blank and I, order the wrong thing. And I just need to be more mindful about what those choices are when I'm out eating or getting takeout, which is something we do way more than we used to since, the pandemic. I don't know if you heard there was one. How long can I run that joke for?
Yeah.
For forever. As long as I want? Forever and ever. And so I'm constantly striving to make that leap over onto the vegan side, which is very easy to do. It's just that I need to be more mindful.
So Sarah and I had this idea to make this 3-part series called Where It All Began. And I guess it started when I asked Sarah if she wanted to join me for KW Veg Fest in the spring of 2022, where we went and basically visited with lots of vendors there and we met people who are vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, people who eat meat. And so we talked with the organizers and some of those food vendors. And we thought, oh, wow, this is pretty neat. We were introduced to some really neat people. And we thought, why don't we do like a whole series, just kind of exploring this. And that's what we put together over the next 3 episodes.
Yeah, we're really excited to bring these conversations to you. In episode 1, we're going to talk to Dave Pereira. He's known on Instagram as the 40-year-old vegan. He's an ex-federal inspector of slaughterhouses, dealing with PTSD, a new vegan life, and he focuses his life now on activism surrounding food choices.
For me, this was a very emotional interview, both while it was happening and while Sarah and I were editing the segment. And from there, we're going to join cosmologist Katie Mack of the Pereira Institute at a local restaurant where we had a vegan meal. Katie is vegan, and we had a wonderful outside chat on a really nice summer evening.
And this one was really interesting to me because it's sort of the funny part of the conversation. Dr. Katie Mack knows how the world will end in a ball of fire, billions of years from now, and is also vegan. So the question is, of course, hilarious to me. Why care? Why not live that life of debauchery and hedonism and just, do whatever the heck you want? And we have a wonderful, beautiful conversation about that.
Yeah, Katie will answer that question.
So let's get started on this Where It All Began series. And Marshall, I just want to say, kicking off season 4 here, I hope that you and I are kicking around town for many years to come.
Yeah, me too, Sarah.
Here we go.
Right?
Welcome to Bon Park.
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 Melinda's Hot Sauce is quality. We are for those who are past the basic. We're for folks that appreciate flavor just as much as they do heat. From seed to bottle, we focus on important things. Each of our 31 craft pepper sauces begins with the freshest ingredients and the best chili peppers on the planet. This is the Melinda's way. Anyone can strike a match, but few can strike a balance. A balance where heat and flavor find themselves on equal footing. Melinda's Hot Sauce. Set your mouth on flavor. Visit melindas.com to find a store near you.
Hi, I'm David Pereira. I'm a former slaughterhouse inspector, turned vegan, turned animal rights activist.
So David, we met you earlier this year at Veg Fest in Uptown Waterloo.
Yes.
And it was a fascinating conversation. And that's why you're here with us for this series we're creating. Take us into the journey you've been on all these years.
Yeah, it was really great to meet you, Marshall and Sara. Nice running up to you in Veg Fest, Uptown Waterloo. Nice little pop-up there. Just showing people that there are, a number of plant-based alternatives available. And it was a fun little day, and it was great running into you. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the area, Kitchener-Waterloo. My family has worked in slaughterhouses, and my mom, my grandfather, my grandmother, aunt and uncle were all part of working at J.M. Schneider's. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that. And that eventually transitioned to Maple Leaf. So I grew up kind of idolizing my grandfather and my grandparents. They had a swimming pool, and they I was able to go over there and hang out, and they treated me great. And I saw my grandfather, build his life, quasi Canadian American dream with a couple cars, a nice house. So my grandfather immigrated from Portugal along with my grandmother and my dad. And the job that he was given was to work in a slaughterhouse, and same along with my grandmother. And so the rest, sort of the family, followed suit. And eventually he befriended inspectors, and he became an inspector himself, a federal slaughterhouse inspector for the Canadian government. And so after a little while, my uncle followed suit, and I didn't really have much ambition growing up. I didn't have a pathway to school or anything like that. We came from a bit of a broken home. And so I didn't have an emphasis on education or where I wanted to be in the future. And I just thought in the back of my mind, maybe an inspector job would be the thing to do. And I was kind of, my grandfather kind of suggested that I look into that because it's a government job, and government jobs are pretty great to have, along with pensions and stuff like that. So at some point, I became 19, and this got serious for me. I wanted to have a big person job or something like that. And so I started when I was 20 years old, and I went into a place called Maple Lodge Farms that's in Brampton, Ontario. And that started my path onto being an inspector and seeing some things that I never thought I would see before. I didn't really need to have experience because my grandfather and uncle had connections, and that's sort of how I got in the door. So when I first started, there wasn't much in the way that was too graphic. I mean, it was obviously hard to walk into on a kill floor and seeing, blood and guts. But most of it was sort of, cleaned up, you could say, when I went in. And my job was to make sure that the line was running correctly, that there wasn't contamination. So that would mean, feces or blood or other secretions that were on the animals, and they would go through a bath as well afterwards. And so that was typically my job to begin with, until I was brought into the live receiving area, which is where they offload the chickens in this case. So I recall my first moments going down into the live receiving. There's feathers, dust, and the smell is just, if you drive by some farms here, you can get an idea, but it's 100 times more than that. So going down the stairs into this dark place, and you're getting dust in your eyes, and you put your hand on the rails and there's feces, and you're 30, 40 feet away from where they're dropping crates. It was definitely, I could feel my heart beating. And I think I've said it before, I just kind of felt like I stepped outside myself. And So, as I'm going in, my only thought was like, suck it up. You have to do this. We have to eat animals. This is the way. And you don't want to embarrass, your family or your grandparents or the person that got you the job, your uncle and your grandfather. So, I just, I remember these crates being dropped down, and I remember looking to my right, and the very first, chicken I saw had half their head frozen to a crate. And I just, I was in shock, but I had to keep following the inspector that was showing me around. And so I looked, and I just remember all these eyes kind of staring at me, while that's, kind of looking at me like, what's going on kind of thing. And so we went around into where they open up the crate and they put the chickens on the line. And it was really hard to watch. They're trying to do it as fast as they can, because it's a speed game. Maple Lodge kills over 500,000 chickens a day, 3 birds per second on a line. So, there's several men in there hanging these birds. And so like they're going onto metal shackles, and I was thinking like that, that would hurt. But as I carried on, I just had to suck that up. So that was my initial start. Obviously, like I witnessed some pretty awful things while I was working. Over the years, like as an inspector, you have different types of duties. So one would be to monitor what happens to the line, the kill line. One is to monitor the birds on the truck and to see if they're alive or dead. So nothing would get really triggered. Like you wouldn't worry about 1 or 2, 3, 4 individuals. So even if you saw one that would have a broken leg, that wouldn't trigger an issue. The only thing that would trigger an issue is if you had up to 5% dead on arrival. They call them DOAs. And so this would be accounted by an employee throwing chickens into a chute and grind it up for eventually animal food. And so it's not like the individuals are accounted for, it's a percentage. And so it would have to be roughly 500 dead on a truck, or I think now it's 100. I think they changed the laws on that. So you would have to, go in and do an investigation. So part of my job as the investigation would be to take pictures of the dead birds, put the dead birds into a garbage bag, and tag the garbage bag and bring it to a necropsy area, like an autopsy area. And so the vet would then cut them open and to try to determine how they died. And for all of these cases, it's definitely weather induced. I don't think many would be like disease induced. I think the farmers would panic in that moment if they saw a bunch of dead birds on their property. Although they do have birds that die on their property, and they'll usually bury them or put them in a garbage bin. So when I would go and do that, I would have to take down notes and witness these birds being cut open, which is, something I can't unsee. I'll see that for the rest of my life. It's just how I have to deal with it and process it. So just being present, and, we were talking a little bit about what workers witness prior to the podcast. And so I was recently diagnosed with PTSD, and it's not a surprise. I mean, a lot of people suffer from PTSD. Fortunately for myself, like I wasn't the one having to be a backup killer, or have to stab an animal, much like I witnessed with pigs and cows. And I've been to all the different types of slaughterhouses, so I've witnessed what happens. So yeah, it's a heavy kind of thing to hold. And when you saw things that you didn't feel were dealt with properly, like even within the confines of the law, like maybe right now I'm an animal rights activist and I see it all as an injustice, but back then I had more of a welfare mindset, and I thought, okay, like, we have laws and they should be adhered to and we should follow them. And I still reflect back to when I brought up seeing frozen birds in the trailer to an inspector, and he said, you know what, like, and I was young, I was 20 years old. The closest person to me was about 30, maybe 33 or something like that. So they called me the kid. So, this kid coming in and maybe he's got a bit of attitude or something like that, or trying to be, ruffle feathers, so to say. I'd bring up these issues like seeing all these birds that were bruised, and at the farm that they just did not care. They didn't, they would come in with broken limbs, broken legs, broken wings, and like massive bruising. And like there was a count for that. Like the vet would literally count how many had bruises, but nothing would be done about it. And so, like, it wasn't only me. Like, there's a number of inspectors that would complain about these issues, and, little to nothing would be done about it. It's such a slow-moving thing for these animals. Like, I remember with the crates being dropped, like, there would be one person dropping this massive crate with 12 birds in it, slamming onto a conveyor belt. One after another. And it's like, if you can imagine, falling off the roof with an ear inside of a crate, like, it's so disrespectful, And so, like, eventually, it got to a point where two people would gently put down the crate, but you'd have to monitor it. And you can't be there, 24/7, unless if the government decided to actually, really enforce that or put cameras there. So yeah, like, I could probably go on for days with all the things that I witness, with holdups inside, like the stunning area. So, I'm not sure if maybe viewers aren't aware, but there's two main methods to how the birds are killed and stunned. So one would be through electrocution. So their heads run through an electrocution bath. Sorry if I pronounce that wrong. But so it would essentially stun them. And then they would go and there would be a wheel that would cut their necks. And the ones that were missed, there'd be a backup person to cut their necks. So the frequency on which they were electrocuted had to be monitored consistently. And sometimes, you would see a worker not there. And so you'd complain about it. And then, they'd retrain the person. And then, again, you would see it again. And, these workers are not bad people. They're just regular, normal people. And they, they're trying their best within that system. It's a very hard job. Like, especially, all the jobs are hard, but the killing aspect would be hard to see every day. And, the line speeds as well. So, I'm kind of like, an advocate for the human part as well. So as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I would say a vast majority of the workers are diagnosed with PTSD or haven't been diagnosed with PTSD just because they don't have access, and they're mostly immigrant workers, refugees, and they're put into these jobs that, us, really lucky people who live in society don't do and would never contemplate doing. And that's often one thing we use with outreach is we say, if you can't do it yourself, then, how can you pay for it to happen? And so, if you look at the statistics, PTSD, drug, alcohol abuse, often people will bring those home, self-medicating, so drugs as well. Yeah, so these things happen, and I think there was a stat to say the highest amount of workplace injuries by far occur in animal agriculture industry. And so physical, yeah. So I've personally witnessed, and I've had some of the injuries myself. I witnessed someone cut their finger really bad. Obviously there's people that cut other parts of their bodies. There's an inspector who cut his butt somehow. It was just kind of funny, but not. So yeah, there's many injuries. So shoulder injuries, carpal tunnel. There was a lady I remember who she had two wrists, carpal tunnel surgeries, and her shoulder was really bad, and she literally wrapped her wrists up just so she could hold a knife to cut. And I said to her, why don't you get a different job? She said, I don't speak English. How can I get another job? She said, I need to make this money for my family, and it doesn't matter about my life. And, I can't forget that. Like, she's dedicated her life to doing this just so her family can get by. But how are we putting these workers into these positions? The Foreign Workers Program allows this to happen. They don't allow workers to go work in, like stripper areas or other types of, work that could be exploitative, but they allow workers to work in these conditions. And so, like, if there's something that I could impress on people is that, with your food choices, we pay for things to happen. And unfortunately, this is the reality of what we pay for is for workers to be exploited. And this is just the reality. There's communities built around this, so it's really hard for people to get outside of them. Brave New Life Project in Colorado, they've started to help workers move outside of these places, give them a chance at living a better life, helping them learn English and giving them some skills to get outside. I wish we had, many of these things here in Canada and, the rest of the world to at least give these people a chance. Like, imagine coming from a war-torn country and then you're put in a slaughterhouse and you got to kill all day long. Like, what kind of life is that, right? And so, that's another side of things as well. And I guess I could get into some of the, the awful things that I witnessed. I mean, I went to court twice in 15 years. And I've documented hundreds, if not more, of cases of animal cruelty. And so about how I went vegan is, like, I didn't even know you could be, first of all. I thought, like, I heard of this vegetarian thing and I was like, whoa, those people, I don't know. All these, yeah, them, what are they like, But, it's these stereotypes that are built into us. It's not even our own words. It's somebody else that made these words up about this group of people. And it's far from the truth. Like, if you look at it objectively, it's kind of hilarious, that you would think that people that want to reduce their impact are kind of, the weirdos when, we're putting baby pigs into gas chambers, So, I was injured at work. I call it injury, but, I contracted a pathogen called E. coli. I contracted a pathogen called Campylobacter. And these things are very common in the industry. I think it's like something like 75% of workers contract these things. So if you look up what it does to your, like to your body, your neurological system, and it does reduce your lifespan, like it categorically does. And so, people aren't aware of these things. When I contracted it, I was sick for 2 weeks. I vomited, I had diarrhea. I was in the hospital. I fainted. And, I went back to work and they said, here, sign this form so you can get your sick days back. Beknownst to me, I didn't realize that I had the opportunity to either sue the government or sue the company for what took place, and the potential of, threatening my life for forever. And I didn't know that going in. Like a lot of workers, they would never know that going in. If they were told that, maybe they would avoid the job. But so I ended up about a month later, because I just didn't feel right from that moment. About a month later, I had a blood clot in my lung. And so it's called a pulmonary embolism. So immediately I had to stop working, and I had to go on warfarin. They call them blood thinners, but I'm not exactly sure what they are. So I had to get, needles in my stomach every day, and I had to, get blood work every day. And it was really awful. I felt like garbage. And there came a couple points in my life where I just wanted it to end. I did not feel right. And so after some time, I finally had the right amount, and I believe the blood clot left. And I had severe asthma while working in this place as well, so I asked to be transferred. And it took a while to be able to do that, but I finally was able to. And I was out in this area called processing, and so where I would see people making veal cutlets or chicken cutlets or whatever. It's just that part of it, and doing exports and imports. And so my job was to make sure that, the daily maintenance was done, the temperatures were right, the process, what they were doing, that they were doing the right ingredients and such. And so, like even out in those places, like you saw things that, like I remember going to a plant and the inspector hadn't been there for, I don't know how long. There was not even any paperwork. So I go into this place, it's like plus 14 inside when it's supposed to be minus 4. Like, it's like ridiculous. And there's a lot of cover up, I would say, for individuals out there, because people get lazy. They don't want to do their jobs. And also too, like, government inspectors are paid a lot. Like, these are our tax dollars paying these people. And like my last year in 2015, I think I made close to $80,000, and that was good, like really good money. And if I'm only doing so much work, like, of course I'm not gonna, make a scene. But like, I couldn't deal with what I saw. I reported it to my supervisor. I saw nothing was being done, so I went over his head. And when there's an email trail, some people don't like that, because if there's an access to information, people can get in trouble. And so I did that. And after 3 years of being out where I was, they said, you're not going to be at this place anymore, because I was doing my job. And so at the very end, they offered me a 6-month contract, and I took it just because I needed a job, and it was still pensionable service. And I thought maybe I could get a government job in another field. But I was in a place called Animal Health, and my job was to review all the files that came in from inspectors that were like cases of extreme animal abuse within the confines of the law. I think it's all animal abuse myself right now, but at that time within the confines of the law. And the things I saw, I mean, so one kind of trigger might be, if you're listening, maybe you want to turn away, but you'd have pig farmers hanging pigs to scare pigs into listening. So they'd have a pig hung right in front of them, so they would listen. And so that's just one situation. I've seen mother cows, because it would cost more to send them to the slaughterhouse pregnant, so they allowed them to have the pregnancy, then they shot them right on farm and, bashed the baby's head. I've seen pregnant cows on slaughterhouse trucks. They gave birth and then they were stomped on because, some of the trucks are coming from like Alberta to Toronto, like 30 plus hours just on transport alone. Imagine being in those trucks. Imagine placing yourself in the individual's position, being on a truck for, 30 plus hours, standing overnight, and you're standing in your own debris, feces and urine and the smell and that. There's a high percentage of cows that are still pregnant when they're sent to slaughter. One of the first cows that I witnessed was being killed was pregnant, and then they take the baby cow out, and if they can spare that, they'll send the cow for veal. And so, just by semantics alone, I mean, like, can you imagine? So this is common. The failure rate for stunning is very high. So, like I was saying earlier about the electrocution, baby pigs or 6-month-old pigs are put into gas chambers, CO2 gas chambers. And something I wanted to bring up was in the United States, I think it's 22 states have banned uses of gas chambers for dogs and cats for euthanasia. So that does not extend to farm animals. So we've essentially declared, because of a label, domestication, that dogs and cats shouldn't have to suffer because it's the Humane Society in the United States has stated, and so have the states have stated, it's not humane. The RSPCA, the UK body, they're more of a welfare organization in the UK, states that it's barbaric and that it shouldn't be taking place. But when they tried to outlaw the gas chambers, the CO2 gas chambers, they couldn't, because it would be detrimental to the industry. So for those of you eating, pigs, this is sort of what they go through. And I akin it to, like, if you've ever been burnt, when they're in the gas, their mucous membranes burn, their skin burns, their eyes burn, all of them burn. They thrash, and they'll bite their limbs. I've seen, when they come out, I've seen one or two that have come back too after being through that, and they're still, their necks are cut. Like, they don't want to put them through the gas again, but, they've come to, and they're still going to have their necks slit open. So, yeah, these are common things that happen in the industry. And, I've seen situations where pigs were completely frozen. And the guess was that they were frozen beforehand and put onto the slaughterhouse truck, but it was too hard to determine. There's issue after issue. There's filing cabinets full of these issues, and this is the day norm. And, I wanted to impress that upon people. And I don't want to be so glim and so, not giving hope. I have seen change. So when I went vegan, it was that last year when I was working in that unit. I'd go home and my ex-partner saw, like, what I was going through, but I couldn't tell her what I saw. Like, I held that in. Like, I didn't tell anybody what I saw. Yeah. Even the lady that I worked with in there, she's a great lady. She's like, don't look at the video. Don't look at the pictures. She's like, just hand over the file to, the lead there. So they were going to determine whether it went to court or not. And I'm like, I can't. That's my job. Like, I'm not going to not do my job. And, yeah, I mean, do I regret it? Not right now, because now I can share this experience with people. But yeah, it's like she said that the persons prior to doing this job had left because they went off on stress leave.
What was that leaving moment like? Was it gradual or did it just happen overnight?
Yeah. So when I was going home, she saw that I was kind of suffering. I was like talking about like how I wanted to move away from eating animals, and I mentioned vegetarian. But I didn't go much more than that because I had this preconceived notion about vegetarians. Sorry, I'm laughing, but it's just, yeah, it's just, yeah, exactly, right, yeah. And yeah, so she made a meal, and then I was like, oh, that's good. And then there was another meal, and then, you know, I decided, okay, I can do this, and I didn't die. Like I still felt okay. I actually felt pretty good. I was waiting, like I was waiting for something to happen kind of thing. Like something's going to happen. I'm going to like fall over or something. I don't know. I'm making up these weird thoughts in my head. But yeah, it was, so she did that. And then I eventually, like, I know what happens with dairy cows and eggs. I'm not sure if you know what happens with eggs and hens, but I was like, I'm done. And yeah, it was like a month, I would say a month and a bit. And yeah, I just went from there. I became a vegan, but I wasn't going to push anybody. You know, for years I didn't push anybody because I thought, well, like it's people's choice. They can do what they want. And, you know, like after consulting vegetarians and vegans, they convinced me that it wasn't a good idea to push people, and I agreed at that time until I started to do a little bit of outreach, and I went to bear witness. So bearing witness is when you go see a slaughterhouse truck before it goes in for slaughter. And yeah, it was like, I wish I had more emotion when I went the first time, but like it was just honestly, it felt like it was my day-to-day back when I used to work, like seeing these trucks come in and being like, okay, everything's fine, because there'd be so many trucks. And but then I started to do a little bit more leafleting and stuff like that. Went to a university and we were asking questions to the students if they knew what speciesism was, which is like basically, you know, we're humans and, you know, animals are not items, they're beings as well. So it's discriminating against, you know, non-human animals. And so, yeah, it was interesting, but I just still felt like it wasn't enough. And eventually I started watching YouTube videos of street outreach, and I was like, whoa, like that's huge. And I'm like, I have this big story to tell, but like, I'm kind of nervous because like I have industry workers that I used to work with. And if I start talking, like what could happen, you know, it's their livelihoods kind of thing. And yeah, so at some point I decided that I'm going to go try the street outreach. And I watched this speech by Amy Serrano, animal rights activist, incredible human. And she just lit a fire under me. I was like, whoa, like I got to do something. And so that's, you know, that kind of like went from, you know, part-time activist to like full-time all the time. That's all I've done for the last, you know, so many years. So
there's a local meat producer in town, and they've made up their own T-shirts. And on the back of it is, first of all, big letters, vegetarian, right? And then you have a definition under it. And it reads like this: an ancient tribal word for the village idiot who can neither hunt nor fish nor start a fire. And when I think about that T-shirt a lot, and I'm think, what is it these butchers are trying to communicate to everybody else? I guess their own customers and those who don't agree with what they're doing. But what is it that would compel meat producers to have such a reaction? Or I was on the radio one time, talking about when Maple Leaf Foods closed down and how I considered that a good thing. And the next person up on the radio, the person hosting the program at the time said, go eat a cabbage, right? So what is that's happening there?
Yeah, so that's a very common reaction, and I think I had the same thing. So like when I look at where I was like having these ideas about vegetarians, and then like, what the fuck is a vegan? You know, like what is that? Like, is that a disease or something? Like, what is that? So I had these preconceived notions, and honestly, if you look at it objectively, you're like, okay, if I agree with the vegan position, then I'm saying what I've done in the past is absolutely horrific.
Mm-hmm.
So
And you have to rectify that somehow within yourself. Yeah.
do you not?
It's tricky.
It's very tricky.
You have to forgive yourself, and all of us like to beat ourselves up, right?
Yeah. And we don't think we could be a part of that. No. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we call that cognitive dissonance, right? Where we're separating ourselves from the reality of what's going on. And so, yeah, I hear it all the time. Like, oh my gosh, like, what do you eat? Like, oh, you eat grass. Or
How do you get your protein?
protein's a thing.
We're fine.
What do you put on the barbecue?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Everything but meat.
Yeah.
I've never myself been able to separate meat from flesh. It's just something in my brain. It's always just been equal to me, those two things. Because it is. That's what it just factually is.
Yes.
Marshall will tell you, we go on many walks together through our, we talk about our projects, right? We go on these long walks through the neighborhood, and we talk about things we need to do and how we're going to accomplish them. And just the other day, we're walking, and there was bird carcass. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
And Marshall knows we have to take a few minutes so I can
Process.
collect myself and I can't not feel something awful. And this has happened many times on our walks, but that's where my mind goes, and I try not to preach, I guess.
Yeah. So
But
we're taught either to shut off our emotions.
Yeah.
Society tells us
Disassociate,
to disassociate. Exactly. So
but that breeds trauma, because when you don't process trauma, it is stored in your cells and in your meat, your flesh, and that stays there. And it's very hard to release it back out again, right?
100%.
So let's talk about this for a second, and I don't want to take up too much of this time here, but for your family, like cellular unprocessed trauma and generational trauma from that job would have gone boop, 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 all the way down the line to you. Then this same kind of trauma is happening to the animals. Then those are being consumed. What are we making here?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a horror show.
it is. And back to your point about seeing, a bird on the ground. I don't think you were salivating. I don't think people salivate when they see animals on the side of the road.
It's grief.
It's grief.
Yeah.
And it's a good emotion to have. Everybody should have these emotions. If we saw slaughterhouse trucks full of dogs, people would be flipping out, right?
Flipping out.
And there's some science to suggest that pigs are smarter than dogs. So what is it, you know? I think often of like that analogy is like, you have these so-called domesticated animals in place of farm animals. And I think people would just freak out. Like I can't imagine why people can't associate the two together, but then we go back to the cognitive dissonance. And I don't know about you guys, but I was taught to shut off my emotions at a very young age.
Oh yeah, especially because you're male. Yeah, you just are supposed to shove that down as far as you can and eat it.
Exactly. And then this whole empathy thing for animals. Well, whoa, you're a soy boy. You're something.
Animals are delicious.
Yeah. So we get categorized.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're just humans.
I've never
as
heard
well.
soy boy before.
Oh
That's
yeah,
actually really
yeah.
funny.
I'm actually going to buy a T-shirt that says soy boy.
That's great. Yeah.
But I challenge anybody to race me on the rollerblade trail at the Iron Horse Trail. You know, I'm just as fine. I'm actually in the best shape of my life, even better than I was in my 20s when I played hockey and all these sports. So there's a common misconception about like you were saying earlier, protein and carbohydrates and all the things we need. I mean, If I was generally really suffering, I've been vegan for 8.5 years. I think I would know that by now. My blood work would probably show that as well.
It definitely would. I love when people say like, "What do you eat?" I try and just brush it off and just say, "Oh, this or that." But what I want to say is, "What do you eat?" This is awful.
Yeah, chicken wings, right? Like, just
Right.
think about that. A basket of chicken wings.
Yeah.
The one of the most unsettling things to me, and what doesn't give me a lot of hope, David, is the mindless meat consumption I see every day when it comes to kids. So I'll be in the supermarket, and the person working the deli counter will hand over a free piece of bologna to the kid sitting in the shopping cart. Now the child's eating bologna, probably already is from at home. The kid's seeing the lobsters in the tanks, right, in the stores. The McDonald's commercials, all the marketing that goes towards Happy Meals and stuff like that. They go to school, hot dog day, Oktoberfest lunch. It's these children are off to a start already, in my opinion, not making food choices. It's just they're just consuming it because the parents and the adults in their life are allowing it, right?
Yeah, it's a heavily subsidized industry. They receive funds to create these slaughterhouses. They create community events, and they go into our schools, have milk programs, they have hot dog programs, pizza programs. So you're right. It is tragic. If you look in the United States, I'm just going by that stat, 42% of Americans are obese, and 20% of that is children, and that number is on the rise. So I can only imagine what's happening in Canada. So with that being said, I was going to bring up a few things with the plant-based treaty. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, but it's essentially modeled by, I believe, the fossil fuel model to get cities to endorse it to reduce our impact. And so we're asking individuals, businesses, organizations, cities to adopt this treaty to start changing what happens, in our schools, what happens at our city council meetings, what happens at our universities. So it's a really incredible document online. So if you look up plantbasedtreaty.org, it essentially roadmaps how to move away from just our regular consumption of animal flesh. And it's very thorough. It's in depth. It shows you what you can replace as far as like something like protein or what you think you might be missing. I believe there's 18 cities that have adopted it. I know there's one in Florida, and I believe Los Angeles is in the process of adopting it. I'm speaking with some of the mayoral candidates here and asking them to adopt it as well. Wouldn't it be incredible if Waterloo was the first city to adopt that? And then with adopting that, then you have to start creating policies around that. And so maybe that can move to more of a plant-based future.
But David, so you go into the supermarket, and I've watched the plant-based growth there, no question, right? I remember one time there wasn't tofu, right? And now there's freezers full of these products, right? But I'm not seeing any less of, if you just go around the perimeter of a supermarket, all the frozen stuff, there's so much meat there. And then every frozen entree, every single thing has meat in it. It's not like I'm seeing less of the meat. I'm just seeing more freezers, right? Am I right about that?
You're 100% right.
When I think about the idea of schools actually changing and stopping with the milk programs and the hot dog lunches, or the supermarkets with their snackables and stuff, this isn't going to happen. This won't happen in our lifetime, will it?
Well, I'm more of an optimist. So obviously we've seen a massive change inside supermarkets, and if you look at like the UK, for example, they're way ahead of us, and hopefully we'll follow suit. So there's a few things. The increase, obviously, like I'm not really for it, but the increase in lab-grown meats is on the rise. I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest thing for our health, depending on how they make those products. I mean, they could probably make those products a bit more healthier than factory farmed animals. And as far as like knowledge and awareness around veganism, I think I have hope because, look, like 2-3 years ago when I was out on the streets doing activism, I had people yelling at me. I had people like, having visceral reactions and, like really in my face.
People love to be threatened.
Yeah.
Great.
It was intense, and you had to bring that intensity as well. And that's not good. Mm-mm. I do events now and people are actually having conversations. Yeah.
So that's a real change that you're feeling.
It's glaring. It's really obvious. And I don't know if what's happened in the world over the last couple of years maybe has opened people's eyes. If you look at like pandemics in general, like avian influenza and swine flu and mad cow and all these things that could catch fire. I mean, I feel like probably people have looked into these things or heard about them at the very least. And the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has stated, this is, if you go plant-based, that's the number one thing you can do to reduce your own personal impact. And it's not an easy question to answer because you're right. Animal consumption is on the rise, and that could be just with population. But I know that veganism and people who are switching for ethical reasons are on the rise as well. So I'm not sure like I could answer that for you, but I do feel that with the more conversations we have, obviously if we implement some of these strategies inside cities and we continue to talk about what happens, or someone like myself comes on and says, this is what happens in factory farms, and this is what happens even on a local level. Like all the farms are local to someone. And also like what happens in slaughterhouses with human rights. So if we can simply raise awareness, like podcasts like this, I mean, like right now I'm speaking to a general audience. I don't get that opportunity that often. And when I do, I try to do my best I can to help raise awareness. So we'll see.
Yeah, but I mean, I've never, all non as far as I know as well.
Remember your name when you're the Chronicle.
Yeah, it's Marshall.
This happens a lot. Yeah.
We used to be at Sophie's customer.
Right, I remember. Thank you.
You guys are famous.
No, just Marshall. Honestly, I can walk through the city unnoticed. Marshall can't. Do you mind if I top you up there?
My name is Katie Mack. I am an astrophysicist. I work at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics.
So we have finally gotten together. We had a little mix-up yesterday.
Yeah.
And when you told me that you also forgot, I was so relieved. I was like, did I just stand up, Dr. Katie Mack?
I would have gotten in touch if it had been the day of and I hadn't heard anything. There was some, the way my scheduling works is like, unless it gets into my calendar, it basically doesn't happen. And I don't put things in my calendar until they're confirmed for a date and time. Mm-hmm. And so, just kind of like, oh, let's get together such and so a day. Like that's not a thing. So,
well, I'm so glad that we can make it happen. Yeah. So we're in Belmont Village. Actually, I think we're in Kitchener at the moment. I always consider Belmont Village to be in Waterloo, but we're in Kitchener at Raja, trying some of their vegan options.
Hopefully,
we believe.
Yes.
We'll report back on that later. I don't know how you would test it.
I don't know.
For me, if the texture of and the flavor of the chana masala is too creamy, that might be an indication. But we'll see. And Marshall, you ordered lentil soup.
I did, and looking forward to it. Katie, do you want to take us into this conversation with telling us about your journey to become a vegan, like when that happened, and
sure.
the choices that went into that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been a vegetarian for most of my life. When I was about 7 years old when I decided to become vegetarian, and it wasn't like my family was not. It was an independent decision. Essentially, what happened was I really, really liked animals, and 7 was kind of when I started to understand how
The connection.
meat happens.
Chicken is
Yeah.
chicken. Yeah. How
Yeah.
meat happens. I love how you said that.
I mean, because like I knew at some level that it was animals, right? Like you can't miss that even at 7. But like I just kind of hadn't really thought about it much. And I remember I was at dinner with my family at a restaurant, and they had the kids menu, and the kids menu had like a little like cartoon pig on it, and I was like looking at the pig, and I was looking at my hot dog, and I was like, wait a minute. I was kind of like had this moment of like, I don't want to eat that, and I told my family I was vegetarian from then on, and you know, and essentially what happened was that they figured, oh, this is a you know, this is a phase, she'll grow out of it, we'll just indulge her for the moment and like figure it out later. And so for a while I just kind of ate the side dishes at meals, and it didn't go away. I never did go back to that. And then for many years I was kind of moving away from animal products as I kind of learned more about the dairy industry and the egg industry and the whole system. And then my sister went vegan. She read a book, and it was a book that was like pretending to be a diet book, but was actually like a vegan propaganda book.
I love it.
and that turned her vegan instantly. And she kind of went back and forth a little bit, but she became vegan, and she became like very, very vegan. So like, you know, going to protests and stuff like that.
It's never really a light decision that people just kind of keep to themselves. Once you get there, it's like I'm ready to tell the world.
Well, I mean, for me, I didn't really talk about it because it was very gradual for me, because I'd been cutting out eggs, I'd been switching to soy milk, I'd been kind of like gradually, you know, shifting away, and then my sister was very, very vocal, and she was hounding me about being just vegetarian. I was like, where have you been for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
I've been doing this all along. But I mean, I shouldn't say hounding me, but she was you know, trying to urge me in the direction of veganism, and eventually I was like, you know, okay, I'll try it, you know, like fully, just never having eggs, never having milk. I'll see how it goes. And I think that was about 8 years ago or something, and I just you know, I just figured it out, and I stopped eating animal products then, and I didn't go back. So it was it was an interesting process, because I really didn't talk about it to people much at all. I didn't want to. Like I'd had a whole life of having conversations about vegetarianism where like I just didn't want to talk about it because people get so uncomfortable if I talk to them about vegetarianism, and I knew that it was even worse if you talk about being vegan, and I didn't want to have those conversations. I didn't want to do that. I just personally didn't want to be involved in it. So so I just kind of did my own thing and tried not to make a thing of it. But it was funny at first, because it felt like going to the grocery store when you first become vegan it's like this really frustrating scavenger hunt where like you find out where all the secret animal products are in all of the foods that you thought were just, you know, just had no reason to have milk or butter or egg or whatever in them, and they just do. And you have to learn, you know, you have to read all the labels and figure out like, oh, you know, this cereal has milk in it, or, you know, this bread is made with egg. I don't know why you would do that, but I
had the same thing with gluten, because like there's wheat in Campbell's tomato soup, and like and prepared vegetable broth. There's wheat in there. Like I can't imagine why.
Yeah, there's so many things like that where there are ingredients that are in there for some unknowable reason. It's not really necessary, but it's just made that way.
Yeah, and like why do Rice Krispies have barley in them and malt? Like I don't understand why that's in there.
Yeah.
I thought it was puffed rice. I guess it's not.
Yeah, and then, you know, things like, I mean, many years ago, before I was vegan, there was a big scandal in the U.S. because McDonald's fries were not vegetarian. But they weren't. I mean, they had everything in them. Like, these are supposedly potatoes, but they had wheat, they had dairy, they had beef, and it was like...
Yeah, I thought this was a slice of potato.
Yeah, so, I mean, certain kinds of processed food just have everything. They just throw everything in there. And that was definitely something that I found frustrating when I first became vegan, was just trying to find, just trying to find anything that I was familiar with that was actually vegan. And then you find these little surprises like Oreo cookies that are vegan because they have nothing real in them.
There's no food.
You know, Lorna Doone cookies, like stuff like that. Ritz crackers, that's not real butter.
No.
You know, so there are a lot of things like that you kind of figure out. But it takes a while to kind of learn that landscape, and then learning what you can eat at restaurants as well is complicated. Although
Learning
that's getting
which
a lot
restaurants you
easier.
can trust and
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and there's some places where it's a lot easier. Like for example, if you go to like a Thai restaurant, if it's vegetarian, it's probably vegan, and so you can which kinds of animal products might be in something, and you know what to ask about. There are some kinds of food where you just have no, like French food, who knows, like they're gonna put butter, they're gonna put milk, they're gonna put lard, like you have no idea, right? So there's a lot of it just gets, you have to kind of figure out, like, okay, if we go to a Mediterranean restaurant, I can have the falafel and I can have the hummus, unless they put milk in it, which they really shouldn't, but some places do, and you have to kind of like navigate around that kind of thing. And then if you go to a Mexican restaurant, you can probably count on certain things, but you have to ask about like chicken broth in the rice and lard in the beans, and like you figure out the landscape of what to ask about and what to be careful about. So it's a learning experience,
because it's easy to assume.
Oh yeah,
like, these are beans, they're going to be vegan for sure. Not always.
No, and you can't just necessarily ask, is that vegan either, because thank you. Because a lot of times the servers won't know. Like a lot of people don't know what vegan means, and so you have to ask about specific ingredients. And you can't just say animal products also, because like people don't always know, what is it. Like well, some people don't know gelatin is an animal product, or whatever. And so you have to say, okay, does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? And even then, depending on where you go, they might not have any idea what goes into the stuff. So. So that's also a complicated kind of. You have to be really skeptical. you have to be really suspicious if you want to be careful about it.
My last meat meal was also a hot dog, so it could be something about like a hot dog.
Yeah,
and that was
maybe.
when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow,
so not
okay.
too far off from where you
Yeah.
were. And it was just, I made the decision. And I also struggled a bit with not wanting to have the difficult conversation with people, because people do want to fight about it.
Oh yeah.
So I would just say things like, I'm a picky eater, or I just don't like meat, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would just try and breeze over it, because I don't always want to have that fight.
Yeah.
But the fight is becoming more important to me as I get older, and as I made that switch to veganism as well. Yeah. Did you want to ask a question before you eat?
Katie, at some point did you see a connection between, you study the cosmos for your life, and you think about the Earth maybe on a little bit of a deeper level, or a more further away kind of philosophical way than some of us do? Was there a connection sometimes made along the way where you thought, oh, I can see where this ties in a little bit to, as I think about species on this planet and time and our place and humans and...
I'm not sure in that sense. The cosmic timescales are just so vast that I'm not sure it comes into that, but definitely comes into how I think about like human society changing in the future and stuff. So there's a sort of hypothetical question that comes up a lot in certain circles of like, what's happening now in the world that will be considered abhorrent 100 years from now, or whatever. And I think eating animals is a good contender for something that would make that list. So I do think about that. I mean, there are a lot of things that are terrible about the world right now that hopefully we will solve, and will be different. But I definitely think that that's one of the things that in the future. Right now I think we have a lot of cultural inertia around it. But I think one of the reasons that having the conversation about veganism or vegetarianism is so difficult is because a lot of people do have a feeling that it is wrong to eat animals, and it's just that it's culturally accepted to do it, and it's hard to not do it, and you can make abstract arguments about, well, if I was out in the woods and I had to kill something to survive and all this sort of thing, that would be different. But I think most people, not most people, I think most people who get upset when you talk to them about veganism or vegetarianism, who get really like defensive about it, it's because like they feel somehow guilty about it. And I think that I hope that in the future, as there are more easy options, as food, good healthy food is more available to more people, hopefully that'll be a thing that happens, then it'll be easier for people to make that change.
That's what I was going to ask too. Do you think that it's the people that get defensive that know it's wrong, and you went there right away?
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to assign opinions to people, universally. But I have certainly talked to people who have said that they feel guilty about it, but they can't give up whatever, or it's just too ingrained, or the only one that really frustrates me actually that I think is a bad argument and makes me annoyed when I hear it is when I tell someone that I'm vegan, if it comes up, I don't go around telling people, but if it comes up and then their response is, oh, I wish I could do that, but I just can't give up cheese. And then I'm like, oh, so you're vegan except that you eat cheese, and that's not true. that's never the case. And so clearly that is not the sticking point. It's something else. But I always think it's really funny when people are like, oh, there's just this one item, and it's like, yeah, you could just cut out all the other ones. Like that'd be great. What's stopping you?
But you can't slap the vegan label on yourself then. Like you don't have to, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
No.
You can make better choices, like how people do meatless Mondays and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like I think it's awesome when people, take little steps toward something that is morally important to them, right? I mean, there are things that are morally important to me that I don't do perfectly, that, there are ways in which I would like to be a much better person, and if I feel like if I can do a few things toward that, then good, that's better than not doing any things toward that. And I think that it's the same with if you personally feel that eating animals is something you don't want to do, or you don't like the suffering or whatever, if you have that feeling, then like you can just do less of it. Doing less of it is better than doing all of it. I think that seems quite clear, but
I know for me, I appreciate just straightforward answers, not all the roundabout stuff.
Yeah.
So if somebody who eats meat says to me, I am okay with the pain and suffering that goes on. I can look at it, then I can consume it. I have no dilemma with it. Those animals were put there for us to eat. Those are ours, and that's that. In the same way that I say I'm not okay with it.
Perfect. Thank you.
This is the parta.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Do you want me to pass yours over?
I don't know if it's hot. Is it
Okay.
hot? 'Cause I
Yeah,
think it's
it's
on a
hot,
warming, so I
It's a very
think
hot plate. Gotcha.
So, how
I
do
think
we
I'm gonna get up like I'm at a buffet
Yep.
and
Okay.
scoop it.
Sounds good.
Or do you want to
No, so these edges are
It's not that bad.
These edges are not hot, so we can
Okay.
move it.
Awesome. Does
can
anybody
put it-
want some of the chickpeas?
I mean, if you want to like split both of these, I'm happy to do
Let's
that.
do it.
That sounds
Let's
great
do it.
to me. So.
Let's be wild and
We
crazy.
can split the rice and the.
Oh,
the-
you can enjoy this because
roti as
it
well.
will. I can't have any of that.
Oh,
right?
you can't. Oh no,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, well I won't take any of your rice.
No, you can. No.
I forgot.
You can
sorry.
have the rice. I just meant.
no.
I just feel like exclaiming to everybody the pain and sorrow of no gluten.
Oh, I know. I can't. That does. It makes me sad to think of it.
It's so sad. That was a fun conversation. And Marshall, I want you to pick up your question where you left off. But that was a fun conversation we had over Instagram too. That was like, oh, you're vegan? Yeah, I'm vegan. Oh, and I also don't drink. Oh, I have 2 drinks a year. And then I topped 2 and I was like, yeah, but I don't eat any gluten. So you should invite me to your parties because I'm so fun. That's my new tagline. Invite me to your parties because I can't have anything. Did you want to get back into your question or let us scoop out?
You okay with that,
Okay.
Katie?
Yeah. Actually, why don't we make this the Bartha spoon and then that could be
yes.
the chana masala.
So are you okay if I-
Yeah. Well, that rice is all you. So
No,
it's
please,
all good.
please have rice.
No. It's fine. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I value is just a straightforward answer, or getting the idea that somebody actually is really thinking about this, as opposed to
Yeah.
Well, I prefer not to think about it. Or
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I also find it really disturbing. I find it really disturbing when I meet people who really aren't affected by an animal being hurt. And I know that some people just don't put the same moral weight on an animal as they do a person. I mean, I think almost everybody doesn't put the same moral weight, but people who can view the suffering and not mind, I worry about people like that a little bit. You know, like I just like that because it's so impossible for me to relate to that, and I feel like the level of non-empathy that takes is vast, or just like because I don't see that big a difference between animal feeling and human feeling. Like, we're just animals. We have pain receptors. We have, we process pain, as far as I can tell, the same way any other creature does. So, we may not have anything in common intellectually. Like, maybe we don't have the same kind of abstract thinking as animals do. Maybe we don't think about the future in the same way animals do. But the basic stuff, the basic instinct stuff, like the fear, the pain, the affection, like those are, as far as I can tell, pretty universal among all creatures. And to see pain in a human and to be affected by that, but to see pain in an animal and be zero affected by that is hard for me to imagine. So I worry that people who have zero connection to the pain of animals probably don't have much to pain in humans either, and that's what worries me, I guess.
I was gonna say, you, let's take a break so you guys can eat without.
Sure, but that's when all the good stuff's gonna come out.
Yeah.
You know that it's true.
Yeah.
All right, I'll hit pause.
Okay. Now when I record all our chewing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be the kind of question where you're like,
aliens vegan?
Probably. That's what I think. Actually, the I want to see a movie where the aliens are portrayed as like exactly the same as us, but like just better. And I think that's why people don't talk about it. Just fixed all this stuff that we get wrong. That's why when we're depicting aliens, they need to make them like super scary and like, they're coming to get you and all these terrible experiments are going to happen. But it's more probable to me that they're the same, but better.
Well, like Jack talked about how we're looking out there and imagining these aliens are all monsters, right? But I think we're actually the monsters.
We're the monsters.
Do you follow Vinny? I can't remember his last name. He's on Twitter. He does these really cool little videos. Anyway, he did one about the Galactic Federation, talking about Earth's membership.
Oh no! I'll have to check
hilarious.
it out.
I'll have to show you later.
Twitter. I mean, I'm not going to talk about your Twitter fame, but your tweets are fire. Like, you're freaking hilarious.
Thank you.
People they have teams of people that write their tweets. Like, this is like a job for someone that they are part of that promotion team, and you are just on it. And like sometimes you are clapping back at people, like just shutting them down.
I try not to be mean to
No,
people,
it's always in a sweet way, but it's with facts. And that's why I'm crying because I'm so excited about and I'm drunk from spice as well. But like, it's just matter of fact facts, shutting down whatever it is they're trying to throw at you. There was one that I think I retweeted. I can't think of it right now, but what were you going to say?
Oh, so my favorite thing to do on Twitter, so a lot of times people are very mean or rude or
of
whatever,
course,
right? Because that's a thing that happens. And I have a few phrases that in my mind translate to something entirely different that I will reply to people when I'm deeply annoyed at them, or when I just want them to go away, or want to end the conversation, and maybe I'm about to block them, whatever. And nice polite ways of exiting a conversation, but there's a translation in my head that is not what that means, and it makes me feel so much better. Like, because you need, like, you I don't want to start fights.
No.
I don't want to be mean. I don't want to make someone feel bad, but like, I do need to express myself, at least to myself. And so, every once in a while, it'll be like, all the best to you.
Yeah.
That's not what that means in my head.
So much in there.
I mean, sometimes it does mean all the best. Sometimes it is straightforward, but quite frequently it absolutely. And then it's like, all the best to you in your future endeavors. Like that's been like, oh man.
Yeah. Bye.
Anyway,
it's so good.
You have
honestly,
you have to have some kind of outlet. Right?
There's a reason why you have such a following, and it is because you're just totally on point. Do you follow Lake Superior's account?
I don't think I do.
Lake Superior has like the lake.
Oh, I've heard of it though.
Has like a super sassy Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'd enjoy it. I think it's along that same line of humor. But okay, so my question, this might be the kind of grown question. Maybe you get this all the time, but you are, the author of the book, The End of Everything. Mm-hmm. You know how our world will end. Mm. We decided that's fire. Okay. Because I had a lot to do with it. So the question to me is like, why? Why do you care? Like why? Shouldn't you just live a life of debauchery and gluttony and hedonism and just go for it?
Well, so this is the thing, right? So I spend a lot of time researching the end of the universe and like the future destruction of all things, and I don't like to think about that kind of. I don't like to think about the fact that I will someday die. Like that's a very upsetting notion. I don't like to think about the fact that the Earth will someday be destroyed by the sun. Like that's also a very upsetting notion. But you have to like that. That's how the universe works, right? Like that's how life works. That's how physics works. That's just true. And so, there you have to, I had to kind of try to figure out for myself, what does it mean to, there's no happily ever after. There's no ultimate purpose. There can't be an ultimate purpose in the end of this stuff if in the end the existence is erased, right? There's no memory of anything that we've done in the far, far, far future, right? And so I feel like you have to, there's kind of two ways to go with that. One is that you decide, well, nothing matters at all in any way to anyone, or you say, well, we have to find meaning that does not rely on the future, that does not rely on some future validation, right? And I feel like the latter, if you want to find any meaning in anything at all, the latter, that's the only way you can go, because even if you have a very strong faith in some deity that's is going to make it all okay in the end, you can't be certain, right? And you don't really know how that's going to go, and so there has to be some purpose here and now that doesn't rely on something that may or may not happen in the future, because you never know what's going to happen in the future, right? So you have to find ways to make life meaningful now. You have to find reasons to live your life in a particular way now that just don't rely on justifications. And so for me, I have an understanding of what it means to suffer and be sad and feel pain and have grief, and I don't want those things to be proliferating more in the world around me. And so I try and do things that don't cause all that stuff in various ways, right? And that seems like a reasonable choice to make, even if nobody's going to come around at the end and pat me on the back and say, "Good job, thank you." I still feel like it's good.
You win.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I still feel like even without that, there is good to be done by not causing suffering in the world if you can avoid causing suffering. So that's kind of how I think about it. I try not to do anything that relies on that pat on the back at the end to be the entire justification.
Yeah, to me, I'm just going to say, just for conversation, to me, some of the biggest wins, and Marshall knows this about me, are when nobody else even knows about them. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've crushed it, or that I've made this milestone, or I've somehow surpassed the last, win that somebody else had, I suppose is the way I want to say it. And just even knowing that privately is the whole thing.
Or every once in a while, you do something nice and you don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And
it's better.
I don't know. I feel like that's a good thing to do, right?
In the news lately, there's been talk that scientists possibly, through DNA, could bring the woolly mammoth back, for example. And one thing that comes to mind is well, what would humans do with where would the woolly mammoth live, right? We're talking about something that's twice the height of an elephant, right? And but what that leads me to, I've always thought one of the most beautiful things I could imagine is that the animal kingdom and other species will have one more good run. I'm talking millions of years on the planet without the humans. That the humans will go first,
right?
And that the rhinos can run through Belmont Village and knock the cars or whatever. You know what I mean? I love this idea that the animals and eventually all of this stuff would be gone too, right? And somehow the earth would reclaim itself and eat up all the concrete and all that. And do you ever think about that possibly the earth could have one more beautiful giant long period in time without the humans?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's unfortunately an unlikely scenario, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you feel about people, I guess. But I do like the idea of rewilding. So there's this one of the scenarios in environmentalist circles that people talk about is sort of reducing the footprint of human civilization and making more of the world just wilderness and not touching it, and sort of pulling back the amount of land that we've inhabited, and that would involve making higher density living situations for people, which would be good in a lot of ways for environmental reasons, and some people really don't like this idea because they don't like the idea of higher density living and all that. But I do like the idea of like certain parts of the world just be like, okay, we're gonna tear down this city and give that back to the animals. I think that would be nice.
Being a vegan since the age of 7,
vegetarian since 7.
Vegetarian since 7. It must feel really good that your actions align with your values. That's a difficult thing to do. You can't do that with everything in your life. We're a world of contradictions, I think, a lot of the time. Can you kind of just reflect on that, the idea of living a life that completely, you seem to have it pretty nicely figured out, what your choices are when it comes to food and the life you're going to live.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm fully there yet in terms of living in terms of my values. I mean, even with food, there's a lot of food that I eat that I know that is not the most environmentally friendly thing. Like palm oil is really bad for orangutans or whatever, and that shows up in a lot of different kinds of food. Or certain kinds of processed food have bad consequences for the environment, or certain kinds of foods are harvested in exploitative ways, and so it's not like I have that 100% tied down, but I mean, for me personally, I think food is a special case, I guess, because it's such a visceral thing, like it's if you buy something. If you're purchasing clothing from a store that somewhere down the line there's a sweatshop involved and you're not really aware of it, it's less immediate. But with food, it's like you're putting this into your mouth and making this a part of your body. It's very hard to just ignore that, at least for me, to ignore where it comes from. And so the idea that I'm not taking from another creature to put to create myself, that's important to me. I don't want to be directly in that line. And I know that animals are suffer in all sorts of different ways, and even grain harvesting, some animals die in grain harvesting. There's all sorts of things that come up, but I'm trying to cause the least amount of that in my diet, and I'm building myself out of something that I feel more comfortable with. And because it is so physical and visceral and immediate, and because it feels like it's what I'm making myself out of, that is kind of a much more important thing to me, even though I'm aware that there are other things that I don't do that ethically I'm sure I should, and that probably have effects on more people. But this is one that's just very, very personal.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on part 1 of Where It All Began. We hope that you learned something. I know Marshall and I definitely did. Join us next week when we're going to be talking to the VegFest vendors from Spring 22 right here in Waterloo, and actually Eric Begg.
Yeah, the Twitchin' Kitchen Magician we're going to sit down with. He's a punk rock musician and farmer, and he makes just the most amazing hot sauce called soy sauce. And we talked to him as well.
He's got some great views on why food choices are important. Good?
Yeah.
Should we say something else? See you then.
Bye.
Okay, good. Bond Park is made possible with the support of the Waterloo Region Community Foundation, the Kitchener Public Library, our local sponsors, and you, our loyal listeners.
We make this show in Sarah's kitchen. If you like it, please rate and subscribe.
That helps us get the word out to more listeners.
The Bond Park theme song is by Alan Lung.